Welcome to The Teacher's Story, a podcast dedicated to amplifying the voices of educators and advocates in the field of education. Here, we celebrate those who champion our children's potential and seek innovative approaches to nurture their brilliance. Join us as we share candid stories, explore impactful ideas, and showcase effective educational programs. This podcast stands for transparency, authenticity, and innovation, driven by the belief that we can revolutionize the education system to ensure every individual thrives. Together, let's redefine education as a pathway to human flourishing. Hi, welcome to The Teacher's Story. I'm Jackie Scully, and today we have Michelle Howe with us with Empath Evolution. And this is really new and exciting because we're going to talk about her services and how it aligns with education, which will be a really neat and new type of topic. Although not a teacher in public education, Michelle is a teacher and a guide who, like myself, recognizes that we're in a significant shift. We're caring, sensitive, and being recognized as important traits for our future. Many teachers are likely empathic, as some of the students. Sensitivity is a gift, and it comes with challenges, such as feeling out of a place and periodically overwhelmed by the energies around us. When understood and nurtured, empathy as a gift can change the landscape of our future. Michelle is an evolutionary guide, an awakening speaker, and a master healer. She started her career as a business CPA until she woke up to her own gifts. She's on a mission to reach more leaders this year to facilitate an evolution in consciousness and join others doing the same. She's passionate about helping people navigate beyond the negativity, trauma, and mood swings and anxiety that can overwhelm the more empathic among us. Michelle illuminates what might be understood as weakness, but ultimately is a gift. And this is what we want to unlock in our students and our teachers as well. So thank you, Michelle, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Jackie. You spoke that all so eloquently, much better than I've spoken. It was like, oh, look at her. She's just bringing it together.
I'm just so
Good.
excited. This is, I think, the kind of person I would now want to really have on the show because it very much aligns with what I see that's missing in education. So my first question for you is, what inspired you to speak up about empathy and sensitivity?
Hmm. Um, I've always been very curious, very what I considered planned out, schedule. I knew what I was doing. I knew how to get it. I could read the room. I could read the next steps. It seems logical, but I just always had a knowing about me. And I didn't really, but I was always moody. And I didn't know why I was moody. And it was like, as I got older, I'm like, why, where? I'm like, okay, well, I don't know what this is, but you know what? I need to get married. We need to plan this out. I need to like have my children. But always I had to set aside that time for me to recover, for me to be me. For me, I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, I am like just different, a little bit wonky. Like I don't overplan my weekend. I don't like to overplan it. I pay a price if I do. I'm like, so always thinking that I had everything figured out, always approaching my life from a very intelligent standpoint. So I thought, I don't know, why I am the way that I am, but I can make this work. I can see the lay of the land. I know. So getting back to your question, why? Because when I was in my late 30s, I had such debilitating anxiety first thing in the morning. I'm like, I have nothing to be anxious about, and I am anxious. So I went to the doctor and he gave me medicine, and I was like taking it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, people feel this way? I'm like, I feel so calm. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, how did I like this is good. This is great. I'm like, if this is the way people feel, I should have felt this a long time ago because my brain was quiet all of a sudden. I wasn't as anxious. So then a couple years down the road there, I ran into another situation. Like all these different situations kept coming my way. And I kept doing what I knew how to do, which was handle it, take care of it, like success to some degree, right? And I ended up in a situation that I really couldn't wrap my head around emotionally. I'm like, mentally, I'm like, what is going on? Like my energy would skyrocket up and then would dip down and be confused. I'm like, hold on. Like, I'm like, how does this? So, long story short, I went through what I would call a dark night of the soul, and I didn't understand what was happening. This is from a person that always had everything figured out. So I'm like, how could this be happening to me? But I'm curious enough and I'm open enough to look. And I started researching and I found the word sensitivity was first. And I'm reading, I'm like, yeah, no one would ever think I don't really think I'm sensitive the way I understood sensitive back then. No. Then I read the word empath. And then I read the 30 traits of an empath. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is absolutely me. I am very empathic, which answered for a lot of the way that I functioned all my life. People would tell me their stories. I could tune in and help them with it or just listen to it. I would get exhausted by after school or at the end of the day. I needed things to help me stop feeling, or I needed to write to get things out of me. It was just an overwhelming amount of energy that it was taking me out of my comfort zone type of relationship. So what inspired me to speak up is because I looked around and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have struggled on and off. I have been confused on and off. I've been moody on and off, anxiety on and off. I'm like, and this is all due to the fact that energetically, I can feel, I can sense, I'm impacted, I can connect, and a it's a lot more like being an empath, being sensitive has a lot that comes with it. There's a role that comes with it. You're actually here on purpose and you're facilitating some shifts on the planet. I'm like, there's all these people that are empaths and they have no idea. And then, they're not aware of the sensitivity. They're not aware of the empathy. They're not aware of what's going on subtly behind closed doors with them. So that journey, that knowledge, that understanding, that wisdom is what I'm here to bring forward. It's not here. It was like at one point I was like, is there a book I forgot to read? Is there something that I didn't do right that I didn't like? I'm like, no, there is no book on this. And once I started to learn a little bit more, I was like, I was reading and I was voraciously reading, absorbing, gaining that knowledge, like stepping into it. But it's funny because even years after, you only can absorb what you're ready to absorb. Reading that same book, that same stuff, I can get something completely deeper from the writing because I'm at a position where I can take that in, I can receive that. So, yeah, that's why I'm speaking up. That's why.
I resonate with so much of that. Thank you for sharing such a vulnerable story. I think it takes a lot of bravery to come onto a podcast or whatever that public space is and share your story. But I think that's part of the healing, not only for yourself, but then to be that leader for others. And when people see your vulnerability, they will be more comfortable to share their story. And that's really why I wanted to create this podcast. Um, the dark night of the soul. I did not know what that meant either until 2021. And I shared, on my podcast in episode 1 and on many others, I've been on the same thing. And it sounds so terrifying, and like depressing, but it's actually the beginning of the healing. It's
Yeah.
the awakening. It's sensing that there's something bigger here. And so I think for a long time, especially in schools, I felt the same way, both as a student and a teacher, very like sensitive in school. I picked up on a lot of energy and I would need a lot of downtime to be able to restore. And I've had that since I was a little kid. And especially like growing up in the 80s and 90s, and I would say even if I was a student now, but especially at that time, it was really hard to be sensitive. You often felt like you were the outcast. And now I see a lot of students that are that kind of empath, and maybe they realize that or don't fully realize it, but they know that they don't feel completely supported in this school system. And I often have students who will hang out in my classroom at lunchtime that are remind me a lot of myself. And I'm like, well, maybe our energies are sensing each other because they're like those kind of sensitive kids. And I get it, like, it's a lot of stimuli. It's a lot of ego. Like, the school system is very much still an ego-centered place, and it's very competitive. And I think there needs to be this conversation about what it means to be sensitive and an empath, and the idea that it's maybe certain people who are have it more so, but like you mentioned, like everyone's an empath to a certain degree, and we really wanna open that up, and we wanna see it as a gift, and we don't wanna silence it because it can be so special to share in community, and also we'll get into your work and, like, how we could see this transform schools because it's not just also, like, the awareness and talking about it and normalizing, but how do we, like, shape the system? How do we shape the space and the time of the school day to support sensitivity, to support
Mm.
empathy, because I think that's where we can really make a difference. So I want to get more into kind of how you see this in the education system. Do you see these traits present and valuable in education industry, or how do you start to see how your work and what you do aligning with what we could do in education?
So, do I see these traits present? Um, Certainly, the traits are present in individuals in the system. But whether they're aware of them, whether they know how to foster them, embody them, use them to their advantage, or whether they're hiding that, or they're however it's showing up is hurting them. Knowing how to manage the space around you and not lose yourself in the middle of that, or to situations or to emotions, and how to set that tone to who you are, and then allow that to permeate the space without taking on what belongs to other people is a skill. I mean, to be an empath, to be born an empath, to feel the sense, to more degree or to less of a degree, is what we're all dealing with, but managing that sensitivity so it doesn't interrupt, deplete you, is huge. And right now, so creating the space in your classroom, creating the space in your life as to who you are, honoring that space, recognizing that space of who you are and what you're not just your needs are, but how you move into a room, what you add, what you don't add, what is toxic, what you need to step back from, versus what you need to run in and rescue somebody with. Like, it's just about managing yourself, and then seeing the potential of how you manage what's around you. Can you manage it? To what degree? What is important? Because you set the tone. As a teacher, you set the tone for the classroom. And those kids energetically will know your vulnerabilities. They will know, what they can get away with, what they can't. They will either love you or respect you, and they're reading your energy, your center stage. They're either going to, and if you, so there's this mirror effect with all of us, truly, in relationships, within circle. Like, how do you show up? What do you think and feel and project on other people? Or, and what, in a positive or a negative way? And how does that, make something more toxic or less toxic because you set the tone, just like in a family at home with your children. You set the tone, the parents set the tone, the children then respond to that. And you might think that at times you're responding to your children, but it's like a domino effect. Who's impacting who? It goes both ways, but because you are the head of, technically your household, your children, you do set the tone. The kids do feed and work off of the vibes that you put forth. And the same thing goes in a classroom. So when the teacher is tired, stressed, burnt out, negative, wounded, you know, it's going to diminish the capacity of that class. Where could those kids go? What are they going to do? They might become a little bit more rambunctious because there isn't a safe, rewarding, uplifted vibe happening. So, whether it's in a class or the school, the leaders of that organization need to step forward and hold that energy for what is the intention of this organization? What do we do? How do we handle this? Who are we when we walk in the door? Who do we need to be? So, in all the work that I do, it's about getting every individual who happens to be a leader, who's leading their life. Maybe they're not leading an organization or a classroom, but they're leading their life. You have to, like, feeling and sensing, just as important as thinking.
I
Same.
agree. Yep, 100%. And I think leadership requires empathy because it requires humility, it requires active listening. I always say your EQ is more important than your IQ. And that emotional intelligence is really important with a lot of what you're just talking about, with like being able to regulate, um, reading a room, right? Reading your energy and others and making those decisions of like how you're going to interact with people. But it is a responsibility of the adults in the school and in the classroom to come from a place of, I want to be calm. I want to have this energy of love and compassion and open-mindedness because that's what I want my students to do. I want my students to show that to each other and show that to me. So often you're so right there. We are mirrors. And I teach psychology, if we want to just even get into just the science and biology of it, we have particular neurons in our brain called mirror neurons. So part of our just being human is doing that. Like we mirror each other. And I often see still, not as much as I did when I was a kid, but I still see some teachers in the various schools that I've taught in that still feel like they need to be in full control, like control and order, and
Mm,
their
mm.
demeanor is dominance. Their demeanor
So
is, in order for me to look effective and be effective, I need to be the dominant
all of this room.
figure. Yeah, and that's not welcoming. That's not a safe space. That's scary. I've had teachers like that in my life, and I didn't want to be in those spaces. I had to be, but we shouldn't be putting that on the children. Like it should be about welcoming them into a space where they're going to be respected and they could be who they are. Obviously, there's rules and there's ways and behaviors you have to have, but the more calm you are, even for the students that tend to be high energy, they will things will kind of calm down, and it's how you kind of start a class. Like they're going to be high energy coming in the class, right? They're talking, they're moving around the building. And it's how you kind of like start it and say like
Them
we're going to just
into
kind of calm. Yeah.
bring them into what their chair is, where their feet are, what we're talking about today. It's like bringing all of them back into center.
Yeah.
And now this is where we're going. Like you're setting the tone for the class,
Yeah.
and they are going to mirror neuron you back to what they need to be looking
Yeah.
at. Like,
Yeah.
so, as much as I think it's interesting about the control piece, I mean, really, does that control work at home? how's that control work in relationship? How does that control work in a classroom where you're managing all these children, and then it becomes about a flow with some structure, but a flow. Like, and I would dare say some people don't know how to do flow. They only know how to do control. So I'm like, and control, I mean, it's so hard to work within the rigid confines of what control would look like. It's it's a better recipe. Think about people coming to your house for a gathering or an event. It's a better recipe to have, things set up, and you have some organization over the day and the structure, but then you're not in charge over how much someone absorbs or doesn't absorb, or what they say or what they don't say. So there has to be some give and take, especially if you're a teacher of a classroom of children. Like, yes, there's going to be a time for quiet. There's going to be a time for dialogue, right? And yes, there needs to be some rules. But if you're too rigid, you're not allowing for the fluidity of what it takes to move things forward in a group. I always say, like, when I
Mm,
teach or when I do private sessions, I am following the flow of what's presenting itself to me.
mm,
I'm trusting that. Sure, I have some structure and some agenda, but I always trust the flow more than I trust the agenda. Like,
mhm,
so actually for me, it's been lately a little bit about, okay, Michelle, yes, you can trust the flow, but what is the agenda? Like, let's make sure we get some of this agenda in here. And even if it's softly put in there, because it's funny how people learn. I mean, and I didn't ever studied how people learn. At one point when I was one of the challenges that I had in my early 30s was my son had something was up with his reading. Something was up. He wasn't he was skipping sight words. He wasn't telling me that. So I ended up getting trained by a teacher to tutor him. And that was, mother and daughter, mother and son, not exactly ideal when I am like worried, concerned, like seriously wanting this to work for him. Um, I guess my point is teaching isn't always, it's not what you want them to learn. It's got to be fluid. It's got to
mm,
be a back and forth. But and I remember that time in my life, I was so worried. So I was very regimented with him. No, we're doing this every day. And I remember even myself burning out because it was a contentious undertaking to tutor your own child, right? Very contentious. So it just brings me to, and I was like on the verge of, it was just so we were at odds about this. So that relationship would have been really difficult to sustain. And it wasn't like healthy. But thankfully, years later, after the fact, oh, I wouldn't have reacted as harshly, but I did. I was so intent, and he did learn. And he wasn't, what he did was he was smarter. He was smart, very, very smart, because I had him tested. Auditory processing, the center one, it was like the not right, not left, but the communication between right
mm,
and left hemispheres. Mind you, I did all this research just to find this because I knew something was wrong, and the educational system at the time and the teachers themselves were not going to turn over that rock.
mhm.
And I did, and he needed something above and beyond. So I gave that to him. But that it was easy? No, it was not easy.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
And that kind of goes into kind of my next part because many parents became teachers in the pandemic.
Oh
And
God.
I could feel that. Yeah. So, what do you think about the pandemic time and as a time of change, and how did that impact you? And maybe this as a period where now we're questioning things more. We're questioning things about education in the system. We're questioning things about our sensitivity, and how
Mhm.
we could do things differently. Yeah.
So what I would say about the pandemic was that certainly I can't say it was a wonderful time because, but I wasn't in control of the fact that there is a virus loose, right? We were all watching this show going on every day about what's being released, how many people have passed away, what should you be doing? What we were watching this show and everything was shutting down, and there were so many like uncomfortable things happening in the media. Um, I looked at it as an opportunity for all of us to awaken because we weren't distracted going to school. We weren't distracted going to work. We had our family home. Like everything that we thought was the right way of the world, everything was turned upside down. So if you didn't go through, like it would have been very difficult. So for some more than others, right? Young kids, young parents with those kids more so than my kids were in college. So I had all three of them come home. And no, one was home already. Two of them came home. And I kind of loved it because I got my kids back and they did their stuff online. So I liked the fact that we could continue to be a family unit for 6 months more until school started where they could go back to school. Um, but I didn't I certainly, I think as a collective, we saw how under pressure we are collapsing. We are collapsing all sense of stability, of fairness, of being told what to do. There were on so many levels, so many of the qualities of freedom that we have under pressure were not standing up for themselves. They were not, it was not going to work. And the idea of controlling anybody or anything was also another dumb idea because how do you control all of this? And I'm sure different organizations, the main organizations did the best they could, but their best, in my opinion, failed miserably, miserably. Um, and you know, I could say a lot, but I did not like what I saw on many fronts.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the bigger picture of what we are talking about with school and then the pandemic, that control doesn't work.
No.
And you need flow and you need fluidity. And with that, there's unknown. And that's part of life. And the way that the world shut down, again, I understand in the beginning because it was just so scary and so unknown. So many people were dying. But to continue to have control
Yeah.
for a very long time. And I was fortunate to be in a school that did go back to school. We were hybrid. That was pretty awful, teaching in person and virtually at the same time. I felt like I needed a clone. Um, but so many places were shut down for like a year or more. I'm like that. It was just too much control, and the control feels like um, people were at a point. They're like, no, we're not doing that anymore. Like we're just not. And so I think in a way, it was kind of good because it allowed people to start to stand up for themselves and start to stand up and say, like, we're not going to be in these control systems anymore. We need to start thinking outside the box. We need to start raising our voices. And then it started to happen. So, like, even into 2021 and then 2022, when I created this podcast and teachers were fed up, they
Yeah.
started leaving. People started leaving industries and they're like, I'm done. I'm fed up. I'm using my voice. Like, we need to talk about the holes that were there before the pandemic. The pandemic was the catalyst for the movement, for the
Yeah.
voice, and for things to change. But the holes were there for a really, really long time in so many industries, not just education. So I think it is very transformative. And like, I'm glad to hear you say the things that, you didn't appreciate about it and how it wasn't working. And we had to do things differently. So kind of leading into my last part, let's, talk about the community and systemic reforms. What
Yeah.
key ideas and initiatives might transform education, the world, the things that you would like to see change and how you're work with empath evolution fits in that.
Well, some key things that I definitely need change is uh, I think we need to go. I don't know what you want to call this training, consciousness training, perhaps. All right. But it's about the evolution. It's about emotions. It's about feeling. It's about thinking. It's about coming to the middle. It's about knowing how to navigate, giving people enough freedom so that they can explore who they are without being told what to do. And in the same way, giving and receiving um, in equal parts, like allowing people freedom, but those people allowing other people freedom as well. Like respect isn't something that I'm just going to give you because you do X, Y, and Z. Respect is a two-way street with anybody that you're talking to. They give you time to talk, you give me time to talk. You have your opinion, I have my opinion. It's coming to the middle. So I would say within education, I think it'd be leadership training, teachers as well, um, sensitivity, emotional healing, a few deeper topics, because I think every person out there needs to start seeing themselves as a student of life and a teacher. Like plenty of us adults are teachers and students to one another. It's respecting where we are and developing that language or at least that neutrality that we can have conversations. And if say for instance, you're triggered or you're upset or things aren't, you're emotionally very activated. Okay, fine. Let's understand what emotions are about and what they're telling you. Because I really do think, I don't think I know this, we all come in with a different blueprint of skills and awareness and gifts. Like, how do we navigate? What did we come here to do? What are we learning? And we're actually attracted to people that can help us learn these things so that we can come back to the center. Um, so it's respecting that we're all equipped a little bit differently, but we're all one. Like when we all win when we win. We all lose when we lose. Like it's not one team won and the other team lost. It's bringing everything back to the middle. It's not parents against teachers. Everybody is on the same team. Now, how do we make this work and provide options that are respectful, not just of my needs, but of everybody's needs in this space? Like it's almost like a little bit of a reality check over who's in charge. It's a we, it's not an I in a corporate global setting, but then there's always the I. You have a choice over how you interact in that space. And maybe that school or organization or parent doesn't understand or doesn't necessarily fit what you would agree with. It's about understanding that we're all wired a little bit differently and how can success happen? How can two people win? How can I meet this situation and make it better instead of making it worse? So sometimes it's about highlighting the positives. When we sit on the side of positives, so it's so easy to sit on the side of negatives. Sit on the side of positives and highlight those and appreciate those more fully. It completely shifts the way we engage, the way we even perceive that reality. So it's changing the lens. Yes, we can see all these things need to change, but if we start looking at all the good things that we're doing instead of focusing on the negatives, we focus on the good and we keep moving towards the good, the negatives are going to fall because they're not getting fed. So and I know as a collective, as an organization, how do you do all this? Well, the leaders are hugely in charge of this, right? But it's it's really creating that vision and repeating that vision over and over again enough that people start coming on board with what that is. And not necessarily, and we need a strong leader for this. This is not like, oh, people are not going to follow someone or even adopt or even listen to them unless they feel that person cares, that person understands and is trying to find the best solution for something. So there's this trait that a leader needs to embody, which to me is higher consciousness. To me
Mhm.
is you need to show that you care, that you see, that you're trying to uplift as a whole, not condemn, not separate, but uplift as a whole. This is where we are going. So now you're taking every parent, every student, every seemingly out of the main, what's the word I'm trying to use? Anything and everybody that's part of that collective within a school is part of this initiative. And it's a we. This is what we are doing. This is what, and guess what? We've listened to all the teachers, where we listen to all the parents. We've had our own little these are your elected officials. These are the leaders. That's what they're doing. And they're giving that, and they're able to communicate that. I often think that communication is should be one of our top priorities. How do we communicate in a way that doesn't separate us from one another, in a way
Mhm.
that doesn't judge, condemn, or shame anybody for anything that they're doing? Because at the end of the day, every person in that school, every person in our lives, all they want is a little acknowledgement and love, right? That's what
Yes.
they actually want.
Yeah.
But And I remember when I was I wasn't young, I was researching as a parent. I had 3 children. I have 3 children, how to manage them a little bit better. Kids will do all kinds of things just to get some love. Some of them don't even care if it's a negative thing. They
Mm.
just want like to them, attention is love, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna so you just don't know teaching about love,
Mm.
teaching about identity versus labels, teaching about feeling, teaching about these topics, and making it a something that is achievable for the students, just as well as knowing the history of the world, the science of the world. You learn about yourself as a developing conscious human.
Mhm.
You learn about things that you learn about emotions. You learn about win-win. You learn about communication. Like, I don't know. And I'm thinking back to communication. I'm sure, my kids had English class, right? But did they ever phrase English as more than writing and reading? It's the expression of that language. What is that author saying? What
Mhm.
is that story saying? Like, adding some of these it's not even innuendos, awareness, energetics
Mm.
into the mix of expression, because we are all like a compilation of mental, emotional, spiritual, right? And physical energy. So I think teachers should get some training. I think administrators and managers should get that training because they're the leaders, and then the children should get some specialized programs, not just character ed. Character ed's very nice, but
Mhm.
it's really it's about the elements. It's about teaching kids how to communicate, how to speak up, what they think, who they are, helping them acknowledge, verbalize. Like, I work with adults at this point, and at the point where they're having life has just gotten them to a point where they have too much on them. There's too
Mhm.
much, and they go back. I need help on my self-healing journey. I need help on this journey. I had this happen, I had that happen, I'm down. All
Mhm.
right. So one of the first things I do is I talk to them about the stories, their background, their lives, just the history of what they've lived, because those are the stories that either somebody planted in there or they perceived it a certain way, and it may not be helping them
Mhm.
how they've perceived the past. They might have uh, lost parts of themselves along the way, shut down along the way. It's helping them reclaim,
Mhm.
rewrite, and then restore a
Mhm.
faith and a confidence in themselves. Oh, this is who I am. Oh, yeah, I remember now. This is who I am.
Mhm.
And a lot of times it's just the most ironic thing. Like, I have a grown woman in her 60s still looking for permission to be who she is.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a
Not,
generational thing too.
yeah, there is that as well. But it's like, if you, if the parents aren't giving, teachers giving their students space, administrators giving their teachers space, parents giving their children space, like space to just assimilate, because in
Mhm.
today's day and age, everything is going 300 miles an hour.
Mhm.
Who can keep up with that?
Yeah. I
Before,
think slowing down is important and we need space to slow down. Yeah.
yes. Well, you can slow down to get that space, or you can on purpose add space and slow down. And you
Mhm.
can
Mhm.
technically use your voice, use your movement, but you have to intentionally do these things. And some of us are so stubborn that, we may not know this is even viable. We keep repeating the same story in our head about ourselves, our life, these administrators, this is what happened. Like, this is repeating organically all the time as a negative.
Yeah. We're always looking at what doesn't work or looking at, like, I think about a kid getting a report card, and I was the same way. You immediately go to like what you didn't do well in. You do not celebrate your wins, right? You just immediately go to the negative. Default is like the brain works that way because it's fear-based. It's all like from our, reptilian brain is fear-based because we had to survive when we were like early hominids. Like, it's part of our evolution. But the consciousness is what brings us back to balance and really sees like what we have that's so special. And I love this part of when they win, I win. When I win, that we all win because we want everyone in a community to be thriving and doing well. And instead of it being me against them against me, it's like we're all unique and have these unique gifts and talents, but then we're all in this organism together in a school, in a community, in the world, right? And, you, of course, probably know this in the space that you work in, as well as that Earth is a school, and we're all teachers and students, like you mentioned. We're all learning life lessons all the
We
time.
are learning lessons. The thing is that life is going so fast. Most of us are looking out, not looking in. And even if we see what's coming and we feel it, we don't know what to do with it. We don't know what to do with it.
Yeah.
I feel for people that are in pain, that are
Hmm.
struggling, because if they had a solution, I'm sure they'd press that button and they would do it. But they
Hmm.
don't, they they don't necessarily know there's a solution to it, and they may not believe it. So, it's a process of education, because sensitivity really is a gift.
Hmm.
Really do have a connection and an awareness, even though you may not understand what it is. And it's getting you in touch with that knowing, that confident part of yourself, where you can recognize, oh my gosh, this is really who I am.
Hmm.
This is really what I'm about. Forget what people told me that I was, whether I was dumb or I was slow, or, we can hold on to these words and they can define us. And we're so much more than that, but it's
Hmm.
becoming aware of taking down that programming
Hmm.
and reprogramming.
Yeah. And that story that was told to you, like what people have said to you, what boxes they put you in. I write about this in my early part of the book of being put into a box right when I entered the school system. I was like not someone who wanted to be put into a box. And that story is not your story. It is a story that was put on you. And then we carry it through our lives thinking it's our story, like we have such ownership over it. And I like this empowerment of rewriting your own narrative, rewriting that story,
Mhm.
you tapping into that like real pure essence of who you are, and you can change it any day of the week, any moment of your life. You have the freedom to change that story. And most of what we think is our story comes from other people, comes from
Yeah,
how
it's
maybe they
what
want to put on us. Yes, that's not your story. That's really powerful to, I think, have an awareness of that. You're like, oh, wait a second. Right. Like what I was told in elementary school, like if I was deficient in this and I carried that through my life, that wasn't me. That was told. That was someone told me that. I did not
the
tell myself that. Right.
other part of this equation, what people tell you, what people, the stories that they've projected on you, the things that you might have taken on and thought, oh yeah, this is who I am, right? This is who I need to be in order to be accepted or to be loved. But the other part of this is, are these emotions my emotions? What
Mm-hmm.
is me versus what belongs to somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
They're not
Mm-hmm.
even mine. Because we could have technically been exposed to this person's angry, this person's emotional, they're sad, they're depressed. Like, and in the engagement, in the exchange of energy, you could have just taken it on,
Mm-hmm.
or you could be feeling it, thinking it's yours. So that's why that whole space idea and
Yeah.
having some to really sit with who you are and then make sure you can hold that
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
steadily continue to hold that so you don't keep losing yourself to all these different situations and these people. And it's not like it's a given that everybody is losing themselves, but if you don't have a strong grip on who you are, then other people can write on what that
Oh,
is.
sure. That's for sure. That's so powerful. Kind of a great place that I would like to end and for you to share with our listeners how they can find you, any little bit more detail about your work that you do, how you can, maybe give certain PD or programs to leaders in schools or working more, intimately with teachers or students even. So please share. I will plug all of this in the show
Sure.
notes.
Absolutely. So, certainly I can work with individuals who feel that they're empathic, they want to hone that, they want to do some healing with it because I am, as much as I am a teacher, I'm a healer. And all that moves together. So I activate, heal, embody. It's a very spiritual thing, but it amplifies who you are in every aspect. So you now settle into something that's more comfortable for you, and you don't shy away from being in settings, from verbalizing, from thinking you're wrong. Like you're here to embody a higher consciousness.
Mm.
Let's teach you to do that. Okay. So certainly I could do that individually. I have, if people want to do this at home, I have online bundles that they can certainly purchase on my website at empathevolution.com. And they're all unique. Each bundle has two or three. One has four programs in it. And you just at your own pace, learn, listen, activate, like put things into practice on a daily basis. Um, the third thing is I have I can certainly come in and customize something for a school or for leaders within a school or for leaders in a group or nonprofit, whatever that might be. I can customize some training to help the group go deeper. Um, I do retreats. I do retreats at this point, one or two per year, but that's, for a select smaller group of women. Um, there'll be some for men in the future, but yes, right now it's
Mhm.
for women. And last but not least, I have, you can go on my website and certainly sign up because I do so many things for free if you're a subscriber. So you can sign up there, or I have a PDF gift, which is called Feelings, Truth, and Loving Your Life, because I tried to wrap it all together. And I can give you the link, Jackie, for the show
Mhm.
notes if someone wants to sign up for that.
Yeah, thank you. I'll put that all in the show notes. This has been so delightful. I think this is going deeper into what my mission was with this podcast with education reform. And I think this is adding another layer that's so important that I think I have been ready to have this conversation. I think I had to go through my own kind of, consciousness awakening, if you will, and then feeling ready to share that and why I think this would be important to have in the school system and with the leaders of our schools really having this kind of training,
Yeah.
and starting to use this language and I think normalizing it more. So it doesn't feel like, oh, we're talking about our feelings or, oh, this kind of sounds spiritual. And people just getting turned off by that like right away. And I'm like, this is the
Hmm.
essence of being a human. Like we should have this in our communities, in all
I think
areas of our
I think
communities.
I like to call it a journey to self. I
Mm,
like to like bring it a little deeper for that person. It's not really about emotions and feelings, all of it. It's about the essence of who you are. Who are you? And how do you step forward in the world? And maybe, you know, only the deepest of people might be interested. But I think bringing that to the table for people, they'd be pleasantly surprised by what they find out.
I think so. I think so. Well, thank you, Michelle, for coming on the show. This has been such a delight. So happy to share your story and your work. And yeah, I think this is something I'd love to continue to have conversations with you and collaboration because I definitely see us being aligned in so many ways.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Right. Bye.
Thank you for tuning into The Teacher Story. Your support fuels my mission to shape a brighter future for our children. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, liking, and leaving a review. You can also support me by donating to my Buy Me a Coffee fund, linked in the show notes. Don't forget to explore my guests' work and show them your support. Together, we can make a difference in education. We do this in community, we rise together.